In the Old Testament, there are about 300 prophecies about Jesus' first coming. That is a tremendous amount of information given to us from a loving God. With such knowledge, it would be impossible, you might say, to miss the very point of the message. Wouldn't you suppose that Jesus' first coming was well known? In fact, why didn't they stand there, ready to worship him as a newborn prince in Israel? Why didn't they see Jesus of Nazareth as the Messiah? What scares me is that the Jewish people, even though they were in charge of the Old Testament, still did not recognize their Messiah. Most likely, the majority of the people knew about these prophecies, and about the coming of the Messiah. In fact, they were longing for him to come, because they saw his coming as a solution to their problems. The question we have to ask ourselves is whether our current understanding of the Bible is correct, or whether we also are locked into our own paradigms and remain closed to a full understanding of the Bible prophecies. Some prophecies were, of course, not so clear regarding his coming as you and I can understand them today. For example, the betraying of Jesus for 30 silver coins. But I am convinced that they had enough knowledge about his first coming that they should have been able to recognize him. When the 3 wise men came to Jerusalem and asked about the newborn king, they were told he would be born in Bethlehem. Matthew 2:4-5 reveals that King Herod called together the chief priests and the teachers of the law and asked them where the Christ was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied. The knowledge was there, but still they did not recognize Jesus. The wisdom of the wise men was not in knowing where Jesus would be born. Their wisdom revealed itself in their willingness to follow those who knew the prophecies. Knowledge is not the most important thing, but openness to God's leading. The wise thing was to be ready for a surprise. Everybody assumed a prince should be born in a palace, but the wise men did not stop with assumptions. The Jewish people had the knowledge, for example, of the long-expected coming king and his redemptive power. They related this knowledge about the Redeemer to the occupation of their country by the Romans. Of course, the Redeemer would deliver them from this yoke, wouldn't he? However, their interpretation of the prophecies was deleterious. The remaining power was meant to be spiritual and not literal. It was announced that he would come as a Redeemer, which he did for sure, but not exactly in the way the Jews thought. Not one syllable of the prophecies was wrong. Only the interpretation of those prophecies was inaccurate. Next time he will come as the literal king because of his victory on the cross. Taking one understanding as literal when it was meant to be spiritual distorted the whole picture. Personally, I think this was the reason they did not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Did you get my point? How easy it is to miss the whole idea because of a small error. This should make us very humble when we seek to interpret the Bible. Please note that the problem is not with the prophet who delivered the message. Rather, the problem is with us in receiving the message. Are you absolutely sure you can tell the difference between literal and spiritual fulfillment in the Bible? No condemnation. If we are touched by God's redeeming power, we will not only be very humble, but also not be judgmental of another person, interpretation, or denomination. The Bible is extremely clear on the sin of judging others or their interpretations. Just read with me from Matthew 7:1-2. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This also means that we should be humble toward ourselves. What do I mean? Well, it is easy to see that others are wrong, but what about myself? Is it possible that my interpretation can be wrong too? Do I need to be open also? That is exactly the point. If we will use all of eternity to study from the great teacher, Jesus Christ, there must be a whole lot more to understand. If we belong to the kingdom of God, openness in combination with willingness to learn more are very important characteristics. Never let a dispute over theological matters destroy the oneness Jesus wants to see among his believers. Orderly sequence of events. We know that the Bible sometimes seems to be complicated and hard to understand. This is a plan of a wise and loving God. We cannot handle too much information at one time, and especially not at the wrong time,